Chapter 1 Refining Gas for 5,000 Years. You are listening at FameTV.info. The mountainous area in northwest China is like a primitive area, with no roads, no cars, and even few people. Surrounded by mountains, there is a lonely thatched house. Many herbs are planted in the open space outside the thatched house, and the fragrance of medicine is overflowing. There is not much space in the thatched house, only a bed and desk, and the desk is filled with books and various kinds of straw paper. At this moment, an old man with white beard and hair was lying on the bed, his eyes closed tightly, his face calm. A teenager who appeared to be only 17 or 18 years old, sat on the edge of the bed. Xia, I really envy you. After only 80.1 years of life, you can die safely. Fang Yu looked at the old man who had just passed away on the bed and said to himself with a smile, "Oh, I'm miserable. I don't know how many more years I will live to be tall." Fang Yu sighed, there was pain in his eyes, and more helplessness. It has been nearly 5,000 years since he entered the road of cultivation. During this long period of time, Fang Yu couldn't die, and his realm couldn't go any further. After practicing for nearly 5,000 years, he is still in the qi refining period. Yes, the refining period. The most basic realm of the road of cultivation. According to strict standards, the qi refining period cannot even be regarded as a realm, but only a body refining period. Only after the foundation is built can one truly enter the road of cultivation. However, Fang Yu had been stuck at this stage of the qi refining period, and couldn't make any progress. For thousands of years, he had swallowed tens of thousands of jiden, but it had no effect at all. 1,000 years ago, Fang Yu's master even comforted him, saying that it was because his spiritual roots were stronger than anyone else, so he had to wait a little longer in refining qi. But 1,000 years later, Fang Yu still couldn't break through to the foundation building period. At this time, his master also felt that he had made a mistake. Fang Yu was actually just a mortal with no spiritual roots. But how could a mortal live for thousands of years without even showing signs of aging? Later, Fang Yu's master successfully crossed the tribulation, soared into a fairy, and left the earth. After that, no one cared about Fang Yu's realm anymore. With the passage of time, the aura resources on the earth become increasingly scarce. Today's earth, even if Fang Yu can break through the realm, he is destined to be unable to cross the catastrophe and become immortal. But Fang Yu never thought of going through the catastrophe and becoming immortal. He just wanted to break through this qi refining period. This is his obsession. This day, he has cultivated to the 90,832nd level of the qi refining period. But the average monk, as long as he cultivates to the 12th floor, he can break through to the foundation building stage. Fang Yu felt a little depressed when he thought of cultivation. He took a deep breath, stood up, and looked at the papers on the desk filled with various prescriptions. "I knew you would become such a drug addict. You shouldn't have taught you medicine back then." Fang Yu gently shook his head and said helplessly, according to Xiao Xia's last wish, he would organize these prescriptions and take them away. Not long after he just started to organize, he heard some noisy footsteps and immediately raised his head and looked in a direction outside the thatched house window. Xiao Xia has built a thatched house in such a place, but he can still be found. Fang Yu frowned slightly. 10 minutes later, a group of people came to the thatched house. There are a total of 7 people, including 2 young men and women, an old man in a wheelchair, and 4 strong men in suits and leather shoes. They look like bodyguards. Seeing the dead old man sitting in a wheelchair, Fang Yu knew that these people must have come to seek medical treatment. "Xia Yaoshen, hello, my name is Tang Feng, we are from the Tang family in Jiangnan, and we want to ask you to give it to me." The handsome young man stepped forward and said loudly. Fang Yu opened the door and interrupted him. "You are late, Xia Shouji has just passed away." What? The expressions of everyone present changed. The medicine Xia Shouji they were looking for actually passed away. Why? Tang Feng's face was pale, and he stared at Fang Yu blankly. In order to cure Elder Tang's serious illness, they used the resources of the entire family and spent a lot of manpower and material resources to find out the location of the medicine Xia Shouji, who had been hiding from the world for nearly 2 decades. After untold hardships, they finally found the thatched house where Xia Shouji lived, but they didn't expect to get this news. How could it be such a coincidence? "We just found No, Xia Yaoshen must have not passed away. He just avoided the world and didn't want to see us. The delicate-looking young girl said with red eyes, excitedly. Yes. The god of medicine must still be in the thatched house. Tang Feng walked directly into the thatched house with hope in his eyes. Then, he saw Xia Xiuji lying on the bed with his eyes closed. Tang Feng observed carefully and found that the old man on the bed had no breath. Why, how could it be like this? Tang Feng only felt hope was shattered, and his entire body lost strength. I said, Xia Xiuji has passed away, you can go back. Fang Yu frowned slightly, a little dissatisfied with Tang Feng's breaking into the thatched house. Tang Feng suddenly thought of something, turned his head to look at Fang Yu, and asked, are you an apprentice of the god of medicine? You must have inherited the medicine of god of medicine. You can treat our grandfather as long as it can be cured, no matter how much we are willing to pay the money. Fang Yu shook his head and said, I'm not his apprentice, that I'm just an old friend of his. In fact, strictly speaking, Fang Yu is considered Xia Xiuji's master. Xia Xiuji, who was only 15 years old, started on the path of medicine under Fang Yu's guidance. Of course, there is no need to say these things, and no one will believe them. However, even the saying of an old friend seems strange. Fang Yu seems to be less than 20 years old, and the capital of Xia Xiu is more than 80 years old. They are not in the same age group at all. How can they be called old friends? However, no one thought about it at this time, and the group was immersed in the despair of hopelessness. After hearing the news of Xia Xiuji's death, Father Tang, who was sitting in a wheelchair, completely lost his anger, and his eyes were gray. Providence is so. His fate is here. No need to struggle anymore. The young girl was so sad when she saw her grandpa, tears could not stop flowing down. Fang Yu frowned slightly, looking at Grandpa Tang, and suddenly said, you have lived for 70.3 years. You should have enough. Why do you want to live? Hearing these words, everyone was taken aback, wondering how Fang Yu would know the age of Elder Tang, but when they heard the words behind Fang Yu, their expressions changed. Enough to live. Where in this world will anyone live enough? What does it mean? Provocative. Ridicule. You bastard, what do you mean? Tang Feng's face was pale, and he slammed Fang Yu into the chest. Fang Yu's eyes moved slightly, but his body did not move. Boom. Before Tang Feng's fist touched Fang Yu, he was hit by a huge force, and he flew back and fell to the ground. The faces of the others present changed drastically and were shocked that it was obviously Tang Feng that punched, but the boy didn't even move. Why did Tang Feng fall to the ground instead? Brother, the pretty girl screamed. The 4 bodyguards reacted and immediately took a few steps forward and walked in front of Fang Yu. Don't do it. Father Tang in the wheelchair commanded with a hoarse voice. The 4 bodyguards stopped immediately. Tang Feng clutched his chest, got up from the ground, and looked at Fang Yu with horror. Little brother, we are rude. What is your name? Old Tang asked. Fang Yu. Fang Yu replied. Elder Tang nodded slightly and said, just now, little brother, you asked me why I still want to live. I can answer. Because, I still want to continue to accompany my family. I want to watch my grandchildren grow up, watch them get married, and watch them give birth to offspring. Isn't everyone like this? I watched from generation to generation. Old man Tang smiled. Said. Grandpa. The girl beside him cried even more sadly when he heard the words of Mr. Tang. Family. Fang Yu's eyes moved slightly. For him, family is a long time ago, but for mortals, family has always existed, generation after generation, and most mortals, who wouldn't want to live longer. You have advanced lung cancer, and you have a lifespan of less than 3 months. Enjoy the last part of your life. Fang Yu said, turning back to the thatched house and closing the door. The Tang family and his party were stunned. How could Fang Yu see that Grandpa Tang had lung cancer at a glance? And just as the doctor said, Father Tang only has a lifespan of less than 3 months. He is indeed the apprentice of God of medicine. After reacting, Tang Feng knocked on the door of the thatched house again, and Yu reading www.yuukangshu.com shouted. Mr. Feng, are you definitely a disciple of God of medicine? Please treat my grandfather, let us. Life and death are fate. You leave here immediately, otherwise don't blame me for being polite. Fong Yu's calm voice came from the thatched house. The doctor is kind, how can you see the dead without saving? Tang Feng said angrily. Fenger, come back. Elder Tang said. Grandpa. Tang Feng's eyes were red, and he turned to look at Grandpa Tang. The little brother is right, life and death are life and death. God wants me to die, how can I not die? Let's go. Old man Tang said. Little brother, I respect Mr. Xia very much. I did not expect that Mr. Xia has passed away. Today our arrival disturbed Mr. Xia. I am very sorry. I hope Mr. Xia will not blame him in the spirit of heaven. Old Tang sincerely said. After speaking, he greeted the group and turned and left. Although Tang Feng was not reconciled, since Father Tang ordered, he had no choice but to leave. On the way back, everyone said nothing, and the atmosphere was gloomy. Tang Feng noticed that the younger sister beside him was thoughtful, frowned and asked, Xiaoro, what are you thinking about? Tang Xiaoro frowned slightly and murmured. I always feel. This Fong Yu is a bit familiar, as if I have seen it somewhere. How is this possible? This is the first time we have come to the northwest region. How could you have seen this Fong Yu? Tang Feng said. That's right. But I really feel a little familiar. Tang Xiaoro rubbed her temples and said. Tang Feng was in a bad mood, so she no longer paid attention to Tang Xiaoro, just treating her as the wrong person. However, after walking a few more steps, Tang Xiaoro suddenly stopped. I remember, I saw him in school. Listen to the full novel at FameTV.info, direct link in the description.